First of all, I'm really sorry about the quality of the videos. There's really little I can do. I live in a terraced house and there's noise there. And, like, this camera is the camera that I've got. So, I actually want to talk about something urgently. So basically, what's happening now is women have asserted power and expressed ourselves as a political force. And what's happening now is we're all kind of having to go back to what we were doing before because austerity hasn't gone away. The system failure around universal credit, our local authorities, hasn't gone away. There's a lot of people are possibly not going to live through another winter of this. And for 8 years, while equality was rolled back for women, every bit of political machinery that we had actively prevented it, and this is how they did it. They reproduced the left-wing identity by claiming they were representing those women and then abusing those women by throwing them to the wolves of activists to be harmed. And then they used major political machinery, like The Guardian, the Labour Party, and our trade unions who should have been doing the opposite, to prevent discussion of political consensus, and that's beginning to happen now. Now, when Posey Parker was thrown to the wolves, it was because apparently her presence as somebody who hasn't chosen to be a public figure excluded people from Women's Place UK meetings. Posey's presence didn't do that because Posey doesn't expect anyone to agree with her. But what does exclude women from Women's Place UK meetings is if a small number of women at the core of Women's Place UK use all the efforts that all the women nationwide have put in place to actively use it to prevent discussion of austerity. We've just had to put ourselves at risk of violent trans activists to get recognition of safeguarding services because the institutions that should have provided that recognition abused women online, and we've got Corbynism, which is anti-Semitism, an abuse of women to reproduce left-wing identities and is a direct risk of fascism. If you're aligned with Corbynism and you want to use major political machinery to prevent discussion of political consensus on welfare reform with a death toll of 100,000 people, that's not purity politics, it's something else. It's narcissism and it's dangerous, and it's not just excluding women from your movement, and this is not your movement. It's actively harming the women who just stood up and actively preventing discussion of what they just fought for. I did understand that class structures would reproduce themselves, and I understood that I was still on my own, even if I stood up with women. But I want to be clear that actively using major political machinery to prevent discussion on political consensus of welfare reform when you know that the death toll is 100,000 people, and actively trying to reproduce Corbynism and a left-wing identity on the back of what women have just done is a betrayal of every woman involved. Actively putting women at risk of violent activists to jockey for positions so that you can reproduce a left-wing identity, that's not really A, going to be effective anymore because we know what that looks like, and B, it's a very harmful thing to do to not just that woman but to every woman you're trying to send a message to. I know that women who want to discuss austerity are on their own. I know why my trade union doesn't represent me. I know that I'm supposed to stay quiet, but one thing I've learned is you don't stay quiet when that's happening, and I didn't stay quiet in 2010 and I won't stay quiet now. I'm fine. I will take at face value if that's the case, if the organisations that have emerged from this are now going to be used explicitly to prevent discussion of equality being rolled back and explicitly used to prevent discussion of political consensus on welfare reform and local authority reform to reproduce left-wing identities. I take that at face value. If you're saying that that part of this movement will be disciplining women by putting them at risk of violent activists, that's fine. I will just avoid that because I don't need to use that machinery, and I just won't be part of it. But I will not pretend that that's valid because it's not, and it's actively harming millions of women, and it's not okay. And it's very easy when you've got the cushion of, you know, a political party and a trade union to say, actually, it doesn't matter when we do that. It does. It mattered when the left did it for the last 8 years. It matters that we've got anti-Semitism openly expressed in our political system. It matters that abuse of women was used to prevent them discussing austerity. It matters that it evolved into TERF. It matters that that allowed paedophiles to organise to undermine our safeguarding systems, and that those systems had no recognition because their trade unions weren't representing them. And it matters that the last way that women have of standing up to that, and women where we have effectively stood up to that, it matters if you try to use those systems and what we just did to perpetuate that. It matters a great deal.